Welcome to Service Titans, the podcast where we dive deep into the inspiring journeys of Black men within the AmeriCorps community. From serving in classrooms to rebuilding neighborhoods, these are the stories of passion, purpose, and resilience. Join us as we amplify the voices of members of the AmeriCorps community and share their triumphs, challenges, and the impact they've made in their communities. Whether you're a seasoned AmeriCorps veteran or someone considering service, this is the space to explore, reflect, and be inspired. Get ready to be uplifted, empowered, and connected. This is Service Titans.
What up, though? This is Service Titans, the show where we dive into the stories, experiences, and insights of remarkable individuals making a difference in their communities and beyond. I'm your host, Anton Taylor, and today's guest is Neils Ribeiro-Yemofio. Neils is a dynamic brother, and our history goes way back. That's why this episode is really dope, because it's not just about his leadership and accomplishments. It's about the growth and experiences. He's a leader, a builder, a visionary who's dedicated his career to creating opportunities and driving impact. From stepping into leadership roles at national organizations to helping launch nonprofits, Neils has consistently pushed forward work that centers people, equity, and community. So Neils, welcome to the Service Titan podcast, and thank you so much for joining. So just to kind of get us started, I'd love to jump right in, and I think it's so important for individuals to kind of know who we are as people beyond kind of our work and our titles. I'd love to start with just your story. What should listeners know about who you are, where you come from, before all the titles and all the roles and the career pathways? But I just want to open up the floor to let people know who you are.
Yeah, well, thank you for having me, sir. I am humbled. I appreciate it. This is important things that you're doing. Hopefully, I can add to the great lineage of the folks you've had here on Service Titans. But Neils Ribeiro-Yemofio, there's a lot of things that go into my identity. But first and foremost, I got to say I'm a husband. I am a father. I am from Alexandria, Virginia, born and raised, Northern Virginia, 703. But I'm the first one in my family born in America. Everybody else is from Accra, Ghana. So I am a proud West African as well. In case you're wondering, Ghanaian jollof rice is the best jollof. I don't care what any of your West African friends say. It is Ghana. If they are saying anything else, they are lying to you. But I'm going on a tangent. Let me keep going.
That's a real conversation.
Yeah, I know, right? You just half of your listeners just got issues with me already. I think an important part of my identity is, so I talked about Alexandria, and I think Northern Virginia shaped a lot for me. When in growing up, we moved pretty often, and most of it was for economic reasons. We moved about, I want to say between 6 to 8 times between kindergarten and 9th grade. And what that did was expose me to a lot of what I'll say is inconsistencies throughout Northern Virginia. And so when we moved, I noticed that I was treated differently, whether it was in schools, whether it was in social institutions, whether it is by the police, teachers, like whatever you name it. I noticed that it was different every time we moved somewhere. And I was angry about it. And I didn't really know where that anger was. I just knew I didn't like the fact that conditions got better for me in some situations. Conditions got worse for me in some situations. But most of the time it got better. And when it got better, I was thinking about so it didn't have to be like that where I was.
Right.
Right. It didn't have to be like that. And so I moved somewhere, and then I'm looking and I'm like, yeah, but my cousins are still over there. Right. My friends are still over there. My neighbors are still over there. So they're still having to deal with whatever that quote unquote thing is, even though I've moved on to a better situation. And it wasn't until I got to college that I learned that there was something called the achievement gap, or the opportunity gap, or whatever it is you want to phrase it. And the reason that's an important part of my identity is once I learned what that thing was, that phrase was, something that could describe what my experience was growing up and perpetuated the anger that I was feeling. Once I had a name for it, I knew what I was going to do for the rest of my life. I was going to spend every day trying to figure out how to close the gap as much as possible, how to make it so that folks can truly live what they consider the inalienable rights for someone in America: life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. I'm going to make sure everybody can do that. And so that has shaped my career, the majority of my life. It's the reason I did AmeriCorps. It's the reason I worked at City Air for close to 10 years, It's the reason I've worked in college access organizations. It's the reason I started my LLC, helping people start nonprofit organizations. It's the reason I'm talking to you right now. So when I talk about Northern Virginia, when I talk about Alexandria, it's near and dear because that experience is shaped why I approach life the way that I do.
Now, Niels, I know we go way back, and I think part of that experience was that moment where we met during City Year. And one thing I can say, brother, is that there was a consistent passion and joy that you brought to the space. And just for a minute, like thinking back during that time, like I know you spoke to pieces of what inspired you to do City Year. It's like, 2008 as an AmeriCorps member, I think.
Ooh, come on, hey, you gotta say that a little quieter. You said that too loud, brother.
What was the thing that kept pushing you during that time? If you can go back there for a moment.
Man, so going back to 2008. So yeah, I explained why I wanted to do City Year. I didn't really necessarily explain how I've been able to consistently work in this space for all these years. And the answer is City Year. So, brother, I had my plan when I got into City Year was I'm going to work here for a good 6 months and I'm going to quit early. Mind you, so when we did the core, 2008, that was, I believe, the height of the recession, right? So like, folks, the sweet spot was finding a job that was guaranteed to pay and you weren't going to get fired, right? That was like what folks were looking for. Because I knew folks who were getting jobs at Enterprise and they were there for 3 months and then they were gone. So everybody was yearning for a job that was like at least quote unquote guaranteed that it could be there, guaranteed you're gonna be there for however long. So my plan was like, cool, I'm gonna go do this AmeriCorps thing. I already know how to close the achievement gap. I got a degree from UNC Chapel Hill. I am a genius. You know what I'm saying? I will knock this thing out. It's gonna take me a cool 6 months. I'll figure out how to help the babies. And then I'm gonna go make silly money. I'm gonna get a good government job, right? I'm gonna get a good government job and I'm gonna kill it. And that's it. So that was the plan. And then within the first, I want to say 3 weeks of City Year, maybe three to 6 weeks of City Year, and I saw the conditions of the schools. I realized there wasn't a silver bullet. In my mind, I was like, oh, we just need to put more monies in schools. And then in one of the schools that we're in, I opened up the supply closet and I saw from the top to the bottom, I saw laptops, unused laptops, just an entire closet full of laptops. And I was like, how come we ain't using these laptops? And they're like, no one's trained us how to use them. We don't even know how to turn them on. And that's when I realized like, oh, it's not just a money issue. There's not a silver bullet to solve this. If I'm about closing the achievement gap or closing the opportunity gap, this has to be some lifetime type of stuff. This isn't no short commitment. I have to dedicate my life to this. And I may just move it an inch. And I got to be okay with that. And my core year is when I made that decision. I was like, I'm going to do the most I can with the time I have. And hopefully it does enough to close that gap just a little bit. And hopefully somebody can take it on after me. That's part of the reason I still do what I do. I made a commitment in 2008 and I've been sticking to it.
And it's such a reality. It's ironic. I was having a conversation with a friend of mine and he talked about for so many adults that once you're either don't have kids in school or you're out of school yourself, you don't know the realities of what's going on in our school systems across the country. So I think you just gave a snapshot of what that could mean just to visibly see both the need, but also the lack of resources, people power that sometimes we miss in some spaces. So as you think about that AmeriCorps, you're just like staying there for a minute. I know there's ups and downs during that year, but is there a particular experience that like stands out to you, or you can say has helped shape how you lead today? Like I'm sure there's some bylines through that AmeriCorps year that's still like prevalent today with you.
There's plenty. There's plenty, sir. But I think the one that comes to mind is I was on the Young Heroes team. So if you've ever talked with anybody who's done City Year, and they've been around for a while because Heroes does not exist anymore. But back in the day, this program called Young Heroes was the pride and joy of City Year. And it was a team that worked with middle school students doing Saturday service learning programs. So it was equal parts doing community service, but other parts leadership development. And so we would work with the students once a week on Saturdays, and we'd be out here and watching them grow and shine. And that was real important to me because middle school is what I think helped me make a choice between going one side that is very common for the folks who look like us, talk like us, or are from the places we're from, or do something different, which is which is essentially who I am and what I am now. And so I found middle school to be pivotal. And so I could do several stories about young heroes in general, but the story I'll talk about is actually a student that I tutored who was a middle school student named Robert. Robert taught me that I could make a difference. For when Robert and I met, we actually didn't really like each other. I think folks thought like, oh, these two young brothers are from the same area. They're going to be cool. Let's put them together and let magic happen. And so I sat down with Robert and I was like, all right, sir, well, you're going to have to learn how to do math. And my job is to help you do that. So let's get to it. And he was kind of like, who are you? Why do you think I'm going to listen to you? So for weeks, we would just look at each other like, I don't really like you. You don't really like me. When I was trying to find some common place, brother. And it came to find out like I was the Washington football teams. I was a fan of the Washington football team. It's now called the Commanders. And Robert was an Eagles fan. So yeah, there was like, I just like, well, maybe sports because he likes sports. Maybe we could talk about, football. And we were cool rivals. But in that difference, we found commonality. And that was we hated on the Cowboys. We both equally hated the Cowboys. And so all of a sudden I was like, well, let's talk about Tony Romo. If Tony Romo was on the 20-yard line and he got sacked for 5 yards, what yard line will he be on? And Robert was like, the 15-yard line. And I was like, you know what? I think we found a way to get involved in that. And Robert and I became friends. I know you're not supposed to talk about like the students you're tutoring, but that's my guy. He's my guy. And at the end of the school year, Robert, of the after school program we were part of, Robert, he was the highest improved student in the city that was a part of that program. He won an award, like all the stuff. And that was Robert. He did the work, but he showed me that I could play a part in supporting somebody, like experiencing impact. And I've held on to that ever since. Like, oh, I can do something. I can actually support folks in helping them be who they want to be. I just got to give a push or a little bit of encouragement or just listen, and I can help somebody out. And that's a blessing. Some people don't ever experience that. And I got to experience my first time on the sticks, right? So yeah, that's a blessing. That's something from my core year I really appreciate.
That's such a cool example because, kids will keep it real with you. They're not feeling you. But then also, just the idea of meeting kids where they are, finding that common environment. I have a very similar story. For me, it was around the Detroit Pistons. And then it's like, hey, you got to find where you meet kids, whether you can meet them. But also you talked a little bit about just this idea, you and Robert, that example, you all seemingly or assuming coming from similar backgrounds, and then they find the same. Whenever I talk about that, I think it's, from our experience, you see there's not a lot of particularly Black men in the AmeriCorps space. And maybe we just kind of say from the nonprofit sector in general. So I want to ask, like, what was that experience like you from that as an AmeriCorps member? But then also, how did your identity show up in that environment? Being an AmeriCorps member, even as you're a leader now, like, how does that show up for you?
Yeah, the first few years, I'll be honest with you, the first few years of being in the nonprofit space was uncomfortable. Because you're looking around like, yes, you have some core members who look like you or talk like you or from where you're from. But then you just look up, you keep looking up and looking up the titles and the hierarchy of the organizations. And as you look up, you see less of you there. And I just kind of felt uncomfortable. Like it's a lot of the spaces that are actively working towards breaking all the systemic issues that perpetuate systemic racism still are within a society that has systemic racism, right? So even though they are working towards stopping it, they still perpetuate it. And the nonprofit space isn't any different. The only difference is they might actually try not to perpetuate it, but they still do it. And that's what my experience was. Like, I look up and I'm like, okay, the higher up you go, the wider it is. And you question whether you belong. And oftentimes there's some staff members who treat you like you don't belong. And you have to feel like, oh, if I'm going to be in this room, I have to be better than everyone. And the minute I show anything below excellence, I am considered terrible, right? That's the mentality that I had, whether it was right or not, or fair or not, that's how I felt. But I will say one of the saving graces that I had, especially as I started at City or Washington, D.C., was Michael Stevens. Michael Stevens, folks who have done City Year around the time we were around City Year, you know who Michael Stevens is. For those who don't know, he is an amazing social impact leader. He was at City Year for many years. He was a program manager when I did the core. When I became a program manager, he was my boss. And I have told folks I have done a poor man's version of leading like him. I literally just lead. Everything I do in regards to leadership is Michael Stevens. I just copy and pasted. But outside of the leadership skills he taught me, one thing that Mike did early on was he showed up as his authentic self. And that gave me permission to one day also show up as my authentic self. Unfortunately, it took me many years to feel comfortable because every time I kind of showed a peak of my authentic self, which is like take the lessons and learnings that you would have in whatever workplace that you're in and then internalize it and then show it as your own, folks didn't like it. Or at least they're like, yeah, you should calm down. You're a little too energetic. You're a little too ambitious.
Got the wiggling in their chairs a little bit. Getting a little
yeah, it was just something about it that they just didn't feel comfortable with. I could share a little bit more about the decision I made, but at one point I was just like, no, I'm gonna be me. I'm gonna be me. And when I made that decision, I have only been successful, right? I have gone beyond the limits that I thought I could make in the world of nonprofits. And I realized that like, oftentimes while folks were well-meaning, they were scared. They were scared of my light. They were scared of me showing up as my authentic self because it didn't look like what they perceived success was. And I needed to show them that there could be a new way, a different way, but importantly, my way. And my way was something that not many people can do because they're not me. So me showing up as my authentic self validated who I am and why I do this work. And I think that's what a lot of people appreciated, whether it was funders who were like, you know what, there's something about this person and something about what he's talking about. I can feel how he feels about the work. I want to invest in that. Or folks who I would manage who'll be like, oh, so if he can move like that, he can truly show up as himself. Maybe I can show up as myself. So now they feel more comfortable being in the workplace. They feel more comfortable having a career in nonprofits. Or folks who had never been a part of nonprofits because they had a perception on what it's like to either start a nonprofit, work in a nonprofit, or work with people in nonprofits. And then they see somebody showing up in their authentic self, showing up in their truth, in their power. And they're like, you know what? If this is what someone's like who works for a nonprofit, I don't mind either working with them, starting one, or partnering with them. And so it's been a validation for me to show up as my authentic self. My only wish is that I realized it earlier in my career. But yeah.
Yeah, but it's definitely one shout out to Mike Stevens, really dope dude, and hopefully on the podcast one day. But it's, you know, it's such a freeing feeling when you get to that space where you can be unapologetically yourself. Because like you said, there's only one you. Only you can do it the way that you do it. And it's a good segue into like this next piece here. And I think what's really cool and hopeful about the podcast is that hopefully there's some advice that those who are either in this sector or considering the AmeriCorps year, what advice would you give them about, you know, just taking a step into this career, this pathway, and in particular for young Black men? What would you say to them?
Yeah, I got two things. One is if something makes you upset, if something makes you mad, like something in this world, something in the society, like if childhood hunger perturbs you to no end and you can talk to somebody about it, you need, if you see something on the news about it, you're going to need to like vent for 30 minutes. Like if that's something that you like truly gets on your nerves, or whether it's that, whether it's the cycle of poverty, whether it is literacy rates, unfortunately, we have an abundance of things to be upset about in the world. But if you constantly find yourself upset about something, it probably means you need to do something about it. There's probably a calling on you to actively work towards fixing that issue, right? Because not everybody is just upset about a particular thing all the time. But oftentimes when you find folks who have been in the careers that we've been in for as long as we've been in, it's because stuff gets on our nerves. Now, maybe it is, some folks can call it survivor's guilt. I call it a calling. If you truly think about what can I do to fix the world? What can I do to fix this one problem that has affected my generation, the generation before me, and the generation before me, and I won't let it happen to the next generation? If that's the stuff that just stews inside of you, it's because you're supposed to do something about it. And you got to leverage your time, your talent, and your treasure. And the work that you have to do is to figure out what it is and figure out how you're supposed to participate in it. That's my humble opinion. So that's number one. And I'll add on to that. And don't let nobody tell you you can't. Because there'll be many people, especially you black men, they will tell you you cannot. And that just means they're not the person you should talk to. There's somebody else who believes in you, right? Including me. If I tell you you can, then I'm lying to you. Go to somebody else. Because if you feel like this is an issue and you can do something about it, you're supposed to do something about it. Period, full stop. That's one. The second thing is, if there is somebody who you share your ideas and your thoughts and your feelings with, and their response is that, hey, I believe in you, or that's a great idea, or how can I help? You just found yourself a champion. My advice for you is to stick with that person. Whether you want to formally call them a mentor, or whether you just want to call them a friend, or whether it's an acquaintance. Frankly, if you don't like titles, I don't care. It's, I ain't blocking your blessing. Do what you need to do. But if someone sees your light and they're not blinded by it and they're not afraid of it, in fact, they are drawn to it and want to support you, that's who you need to stick beside of. Michael Stevens is one of those people. Jason Holton, Jeff Franco. I can name you, Phil Robinson. I can name you a bunch of brothers that sit here who have saw my light and said, you know what, there's something about him. I'm going to help him out. If he ever needs help, I'm going to help him out. And I would not be where I am today. I wouldn't even be in the nonprofit sector if it wasn't for a group of men who encouraged me. But it's your job, if someone encourages you, to follow up with them, to connect with them, to stay in contact with them, to ask them for advice. Like, they have already showed you that they believe in you. And so you better latch onto them and squeeze everything you can out of that relationship, because that's what's going to fuel you. And then it's your job to do the same thing with someone else. You see somebody else and you're like, there's something about this person. I want to pour into that person. And they ask you for advice, you better pour into them. That's the second thing I'll say.
Man, Niels, you got me fired up, man. And like each one teach one. Like, we owe it to each other to pass information on. It takes a community for all of us. And man, you name so many dynamic brothers in that list that I can say, even in my ways, that I've had some chance of crossing paths with them. And it's something powerful when you got people who are behind you and see something in you that sometimes you may not see in yourself. And I think with that, I want to segue to a segment of our podcast where we just do that, shine a light on a service titan in our lives, that is someone who's inspired us, whether that's something big, something that maybe done personal, like on the slide, just looking out for you. We'd love for you to recognize a service titan in your life. But I know it's so important from my community to have an elder or someone say, like, I see what you're doing, young man. So I want to give you a chance to pay that forward to someone who's impacted you in your life.
I'm gonna be a little unconventional. Service titan is my mom.
Love it.
My mom. That is my hero. She, not to give her full resume, but from the outside in, what somebody would see if they saw my mom when I was growing up, they would see a single mother who was a waitress at Denny's for many years and was a front desk administrator for Capital One for going on 30 years. And that would be her story. They would just say, that's who she is. But my mom is so dynamic. And I believe part of the reason that I feel like I can do anything is because I saw someone do anything they put their mind into. So yes, my mom was the waitress for many years. And yes, my mom has been a front administrator for many years. But she also sent 2 of her biological children to and through college, and they both got master's degrees. That's one. She's also a foster mom. She's been a foster mom for at least the past 20 years. I don't even know how many foster brothers and sisters I have. It's that many folks that she has shepherded, supported. And look, Thanksgiving is ridiculous, brother. Thanksgiving, the house is packed. All 3 floors of the house is packed because they all her children, right? Everybody comes back. It don't matter how long they've been out of the house for. They come back to my mom's house because she's everybody's mom. So she's been a foster mom for several years. She is an ordained minister, right? So my mom and I enrolled in college at the same time. I got my bachelor's degree before her. She got her master's degree before me. And she's gotten her PhD. I think she's working on her second PhD, or she already got her second PhD. So she won the race. I may have won the first round, but she's won the race.
Let me show you something.
She is also a professor, right? So she is teaching a new generation of social workers and family counselors. She has been a poll officer for Virginia elections as long as I can remember. Right. So she told me the act of once she became a U.S. citizen, she has been a poll officer ever since. I think she stopped when I had to go to college and she needed folks to be around the house to take care of foster kids. You know what I'm saying? She came in civic minded and showed the power of elections and the power of voting that I saw immediately. Right. This is just the stuff off the top of the dome. I can go on for 10 more minutes about my mom. So the reason I felt like I could get a master's degree is because my mom got one. The reason I felt like I could start businesses because my mom started businesses. The reason I feel like I could be a social impact leader is because my mom is a social impact leader. One of the first nonprofits I ever started with my LLC was my mom's nonprofit, a religious Christian nonprofit that supports communities throughout Northern Virginia. I really get to see a hero in action. And by seeing her greatness, I feel like I can be great too. So that's a service titan that I'd like to acknowledge.
Thank you for sharing that. And when you talk about having an example of what civic minded means, what hard work means, it can't be a better example of what you shared about moms, man. So thanks for sharing that. And before we kind of wrap things up, I really want to give you an opportunity to share with our listeners ways they can stay in touch with you, perhaps your social media, think projects you're working on, ways that they can, get connected to endeavors that you're a part of.
Yeah. So best way to get connected to me is through LinkedIn. I have other social medias, but I frankly don't check them. So if you want to find me on LinkedIn. First name is Neils, Neils. Last name is Ribeiro-Yemofio. I promise you there is not another Ribeiro-Yemofio. So if you find me, that is me. Ribeiro-Yemofio. I am proud to be the executive director for a social impact organization called LIT DC. It's a national organization. I am the DC affiliate executive director. And the premise of LIT is to break the cycle of poverty by investing in parents. It's an amazing organization. Please check us out at whywelift.org. I am also the CEO of my LLC. It was originally called Heroes for Hire. It is now branded as V2R Academy. The entire premise of the LLC is to help social entrepreneurs take their ideas for change and turning it into fully functional 501c3 nonprofit organizations. Since 2017, I've worked with over 200 social entrepreneurs to actually take their ideas and make them nonprofit organizations. And then I think the last thing I'll share is most recently, I've taken 7 or 8 years of consulting experience and consolidated it all into a less than 60-page book called From Vision to Reality. So if you ever want to think about starting your own social impact venture, feel free to read the book. It is available on ebook, audio, and hard copy. Just Google it. You'll find it. You just From Vision to Reality in my name, and hopefully it will help you start your own social impact venture.
I can't say enough. Truly thank you for taking time to join the podcast. As always, love the energy, the humor that you bring to the space. And listeners, be sure to connect with Neils on the platforms he highlighted. We'll also make sure that those things are available in the show notes. With that, until next time, keep the conversation flowing, keep service front and center, and continue shining bright in your communities. This is Service Titans. Thank you for listening.
Thank you for joining us as we explored the inspiring journeys of Black men in AmeriCorps. Keep the conversation going by connecting with us on social media. Until next time, stay committed, stay courageous, and keep striving to make a difference. This is Service Titans, where every story told is a testament to the power of service. Thank you for listening.